All right, everyone, and welcome to Aurora Space Program Extras, the series where we go over the crafts covered in the previous episode of the Aurora Space Program. Um, Here we are. We're going to start off with the rockets this time. I usually start off with the planes, but I have a lot of rockets to cover, so I want to get those underway and only one plane to cover. So let me just show you our first rocket here. This is an Ahote 500. I had just shown you this in the previous extras episode. On accident, I had accidentally saved the 500 over the Ahote 400. But that's a little bit unfortunate, but here we get to actually cover the vehicle. This rocket was designed as an early attempt at a polar orbiter. Very simple, very very few upgrades from the Ahote 4. You can see we are utilizing the XLR-43 engine. Very simple, same thing. And then if we go up here, you can see we have a bit of an extended fairing. Now, what could this be, do you say? It is a new AJ10 engine. So it's the AJ10 early. This is the AJ1037. Different than the Aerobee variant of the AJ10. This one has a 2-minute burn time. 1 minute 55 seconds. We utilize only 1 minute and 46 seconds of that. And up here you can see it's got a bit of a problem with reliability. At the start you get very little reliability, I believe, close to like 80 something and 80 something percent. And with that starting reliability, it's really difficult to guarantee this engine's ignition. And as you move on, like things will get a little bit better, but uh, it's always been a little bit of a struggle for me to actually get that engine to ignite. And on top, we have the same two stages with 100 units of electric charge and the same uh, experiments. Some things that you can do to save weight on these rockets is change your fuel tanks. Make sure that they're always at the upgraded maximum, and you can see that I did that for these two tanks here at the bottom. I use stringer tanks, which are the newest tanks that I had. Those are another two upgrades that I did for this rocket. Um, because largely the AJ10 upper stage is similar to its predecessor. So how did we manage to squeeze out those 250 or so extra meters per second of delta V? We did it with these aluminum stringer tanks. I didn't do it for the nitrogen tank because it was small, and I didn't feel like it was worth it to try and tool that tank in a different format for the amount of weight that it actually gives. Um, so I managed to just do it for these two bottom tanks. Next, we're going to go to the Ahote 600. I'll be right back. All right, so following that failure of the Ahote 500, it had largely been up to an engine failure that I had in the second stage, uh, due to that AJ10's reliability, of course. But from that failure, I developed the TAN-2. And this is a new satellite on top of an Ahote 600 booster, which is the next generation in the Ahote boosters. And to be honest, it is the last generation of the 100 series of Ahote boosters. It would be the one that would take us to fill out our light satellite contracts, as I had no further money in 1957 to spend on rocket development. I had to spend all my money on satellite development, because it was just, we were really cutting it close with those final contracts. You can still see I have 36 tons of controllable mass on the Ahote 600 booster, and it utilizes an aluminum stringer tank. One big change, the biggest change on this rocket, the reason it has 10,000 meters per second of delta V, is this engine here down at the bottom. This is an LR43. Previously, we had utilized the XLR43. and that was a 65-second burn time. This now has 135 seconds worth of burn time, and that is pretty big deal. I know it seems like very little, but your most powerful engine should be the one that gets you out of the lower atmosphere. And then from that point, your less powerful vacuum optimized engines like the AJ-10 should be the ones that take you on towards orbit. Now, in my mind, this means you want to escape the lower atmosphere utilizing only your first stage, or get up to the upper atmosphere or beyond that utilizing only this first stage. From then, your apoapsis can be adjusted and you can coast a little bit utilizing the second stage, but you must make sure that you try to get as far as possible using this first rocket. Excuse me. So, this upgrade was huge for us. It managed to get our crafts much higher than they had ever been before, and it utilized very simple rocketry, and it was the last thing that we had developed for the Hote series boosters before we moved on to our next series of boosters, which is going to be in 1958. Up here at top, the largest change between the Taean-1 prototypes, the prototype satellites that we utilized on our Ahote 400 and our Ahote 500 boosters, is we now have 1,000 units of electric charge, and this would get us, I can't model it in the VAB, but that should get us a uh, a few extra days worth of electricity, or not days, but hours of electricity when all experiments are running. And so following that, I'm going to move on to the next Ahote rocket, the next Taean rocket, excuse me. All right, welcome back. Here we have the Taean 3SP. You know, the Taean 2 had a bit of a failure, and so we were really riding on this Taean 3SP working, because should we have had a success here, we would have had only a very limited amount of time to get the Taean 4 and then the Taean 5 in orbit, and those are our two last satellites required for the Light Satellites program. So here we have the Taean 3SP. This is going to be our first solar-powered satellite, and it utilizes these little hexagon solar panels. Something that you can do is actually disable this antenna in here, if you have antennas on the outside like the Taean 3SP. And if you just want to pop that off, you can see I have perpetual electric charge due to the solar panels, and it utilizes a bunch of little tiny solar panels all over the place, and then this hexagon. And the reason I have solar panels on all sides is because you're going to be spun up by these motors, and if you launch at a certain time of day, hopefully the rocket will be at its apogee spinning as the sun is perpendicular to its path of travel. As it's going this way, the sun will be out this side. And that will allow these solar panels to get pretty good exposure as it spins around. These little panels were largely a backup in case the 3SP did not have enough charge, or was at an awkward angle, so the sun had to hit from top or from the bottom. The little solar panels would at least assist in the charging and extend the life of the probe. So that's it for the Taean 3SP, a very simple probe, just utilizes 1,000 electric charge like the last one, and has all the scans started and ready to go. And I'll come back with the next Taean. All right, and here we are back with the Taean 4. This one has a very light electric charge of around 7 hours and 25 minutes, assuming all of its science is not running. We can disable the antenna, increasing its lifespan, and then should we disable the avionics, and then it has an extended life. The avionics are not needed necessarily because it's not controllable. But if you do that, make sure that you have an extra antenna on board. Here we have the TAN 4. It's just mostly surrounded by these solar panels. I put a little hex panel on the top to cover it better than the previous generation's worth of solar panels. And this is supposed to do some atmospheric tests uh, on the Earth's upper atmosphere. One thing I will note, see how this, I can't zoom in any further, but see how this barely touches the solar panels? Change the diameter, lower it down. Because when this thing decouples, if it touches even a pixel of these solar panels, it will break them and they will not be able to be utilized. Even though all of their solar cells would be exposed still, they are not able to be utilized because it touched a pixel of the solar panel as it was decoupling. So if you have a satellite that utilizes a decoupler, make sure that the decoupler is on the outside of the solar panels. I don't really know what makes it break or what makes it so weak, but make sure you set that decoupler so that way it's not even touching a single solar panel. That's my advice. All right, and we're going to move on to the last satellite of 1957, the real buzzer beater satellite that saved our space program. And welcome to our final satellite, the TAN 5. This is the radiation counting satellite that was designed for the final contract of the Light Satellites program. And it's kind of strange to me. So I have a couple issues with this satellite. One, I made a foolish mistake and utilized these tiny solar panels. Um, this satellite does consume a lot more power than it says here. When I built this satellite, I was like, oh, let me reference my electric charge readout here, and it says perpetual. It says perpetual. However, it is not perpetual. I mean, this satellite maybe lasted a few could last maybe a day or 2 days. I'm not sure exactly the numbers, but this satellite is not perpetual. You have to make sure I would definitely maybe even invest in this like an ampere mod or something. So let's see, what does it say? It says 37 minutes. That's not possible because it lasted way longer in my game, but this readout, at least over here, is not very accurate. I know because when I first got up there in space, the satellite began to lose power. Not fast, not really fast at all, but it was losing power pretty regularly. However, when I went back to the tracking station, the satellite would say perpetual and it didn't lose any more power. So I was able to complete that contract by leaving the satellite in orbit and just not visiting it um, to watch the contract finish. I was able to do it without like I never watched the satellite. I never was in the in the tracking station flying the actual satellite because if I flew it, then it started to lose power. But when I was in the tracking station or if I was in the space center, it was perpetual power. So maybe that's a bug. I'm not really sure. I will take it. It allowed us to continue the YouTube series. However, if you are doing this at home, make sure you check, triple check, simulate whatever you have to do to make sure that these satellites actually can they make enough power. I was planning on making this like a geodesic, um, but I decided against that. And this satellite definitely did not have the power that it should have had to actually survive. And don't always pay attention to this little electric charge down here. I will say that is my lesson that I will give to you. That I hope you learn something from. Uh, you might be a little bit surprised when your orbit comes around and I managed to pass by, I mean, literally, this was probably the last satellite that I could afford. I managed to launch it and it was successful. Thank goodness it was successful. Um, but it really got it kept the Aurora Space Program alive and it kept the YouTube series going by the skin of my teeth. Literally the closest I've ever been to a catastrophe in this series so far. Um, I'm hoping that no other catastrophes befall us. I do have a rocket under development for next year, and I'm hoping that the rocket will prove to be very useful and successful, much more successful than the Ahote 600. Though I still believe I have two more launches of the Ahote 600 before my next rocket is debuted. Um, always make sure that you double check your work. I know I spoke about this in 1956 extras episode. I know I spoke about it in the 1955 extras episode. It's just make sure you double check it. I definitely didn't early on in this program and I will be going forward. So there's my lesson to be learned from this satellite. Um, that's it for the satellites of this episode. So I am going to hop right on over to the space plane hangar, and we're going to take a look at the only jet, the only plane of this episode. And welcome back. Well, here we are with the Hotwa XJ4. Now, this is probably my favorite jet of the series. It is insanely fast. It doesn't show a thrust to weight ratio, but I'm sure it's close to 1.5 or 2 on this plane. And here's the lag back. I don't know why we get so much lag in the space plane hangar. When I touch any of these windows, the game freezes for like 2 seconds. And then when I go back, game freezes for 2 seconds. It's weird. No idea why that would be caused. But yeah, anyways, so I'm gonna quickly go over the decals on this plane because I think it's pretty cool what I did with some of these. I added this little ejection seat decal because we have an ejection seat and that can be useful in the event of an emergency. I added these two jet intake decals. You can see how I both point to these big pitot intakes. Um, and they are really useful probably for the Kerbals who are walking around down here or on the tarmac out when the plane is getting rolled out. They don't want to be pulled into this gigantic engine. So here you can see our engine only takes jet fuel, of course, only the finest products. We've got a little American flag on one wing. I thought it looked weird on the other wing, so I decided to only put it on one. And of course, the Aurora Space Program logo. Very good. I'm very happy with these decals that I use on these planes, and sometimes they just don't get shown off a lot in the video, and I want to show them off myself personally. So when it comes to this plane, I was kind of I was kind of at a loss. I wanted to create a plane that could do the Mach 2 contract, and there were really no engines that I had at the time that were capable of completing that contract easily or safely uh, without utilizing rockets at some point. And I wanted to see if I could maximize the potential of the engines that I did have access to. So in that vein, I decided to utilize this engine. This is the RJ 55's J67. So if I go over to the jet engines tab, that's going to be this one. This is developed by Curtis Wright, and it was used here on a X. It's designed for the XF 103. And it says at Mach 2.24, the turbojet would be shut down and the ramjet, the RJ 55, would power it up to Mach 3. Now, I never got that to work, and I kind of like played that off in the episode as, oh, well, the instability of the aircraft or whatever. I can't remember exactly what I said, but the instability of the aircraft causes this plane not to be safe to use the ramjet with, and so they permanently disabled the ramjet. Well, for me, so when you see this engine, there are two engines, two thrust limiters. Um, when you activate the engine, there's two buttons to activate and deactivate the engine. It didn't really make any sense to me why when I activated the ramjet, even if I was up to Mach 2, 2.25 or whatever, the ramjet would always lose speed. The plane would immediately lose speed. And I have no idea why that would be. Maybe somebody else can answer this in the comments if you've watched this far in the video. I know this is, I usually do planes at the beginning of the video, but um, I could never figure out why that ramjet wouldn't actually propel the plane any faster. And I wondered if it was because these pitot intakes are out of line with the engine, and the the intake needs to be in front of the engine. I'm not really sure. As you can see, this is quite a huge engine. It, I think I said in the video, it's just a plane with or it's a engine with wings, and that's the truth. This thing is gigantic, and it's even bigger than our fuselage, which is why these little pipes and stuff, the bypass pipes, stick out. And I tried to cover that up at least on the top with this dorsal fin that runs the whole length almost all the way to the point where the pipe juts out. And I covered most of the pipe with that fin, and I utilized in the video, I explained that away as like a ramp up to lower the pressure on the tip of the uh, yaw control surface. But I'm not entirely sure that it does lower the pressure. I'm going to go ahead and open up Ferrum Aerospace. If I go to transonic design, cross-sectional curve area, um, yeah, I'm not sure that it really does lower the pressure actually. So the pressure you can see is at pretty high in front of these wheels, and the pressure dip like sharply jumps up ahead of the fin. It looks like maybe the pressure does get really high, but I'm not sure if that's just because of these fuel tanks on the side, or if it's from the pitot intakes. The pressure does jump up here. If I raise the gear, does that change it? Yeah, it does. So this must be from the pitot intakes. This is obviously from the nose of the craft. And then this is from this bump out for the air brakes. And then this is from the dorsal fin. The pressure increases here due to these little intakes for the afterburner, and the pressure must increase here for the pitot intakes. But the pressure is already high because the dorsal fin starts out this way. But maybe it did lower the pressure of the dorsal fin. Who knows? Who knows? I did my best trying to design this plane to reach Mach 2, but we really are pushing the limits of what jet engines are capable of with this plane. And the only way that I could maybe get faster is if I did an uh like a fully designed ramjet plane. And I think that that's probably what I will do if I ever do another X-Jet. This is so far, and I'm up to 1959 in recording. This is so far the last ramjet, or excuse me, X-Jet that we have created. And I'd love to make more, but there's just not much use for them after the X-plane program is complete, and they uh they don't really perform a lot of science. I guess I could make a couple jets to collect all the science from hypersonic flight, maybe, but for now I think this is good enough. But you can see the pressure does dip down as well below the plane. Um, it does dip down after it passes over these things. So there is a negative pressure on the fuselage here and here. That probably causes a little bit of stress here, but I never experienced that in the plane. I never get to actually see that. And that probably causes a little bit of stress here with the dorsal fin because there's so much negative pressure just before that. But it's probably fine. But I'm going to go ahead and turn off these little lines, and I'll talk a little bit about how the plane works. So I utilized a bit of this tank for fuel. Even though majority of it is taken up by the engine, I imagine in my mind that anything that's not these little pipes, you can see that the engine dips in slightly. See how it like curves inwards? And there's like this would essentially be like a sharp toroid around the engine that fuel, in my mind, could be stored in. And so there's a little bit of fuel in the tanks. I don't utilize more than 40% of that space because there's no way that you can use 50% or more. And then there's these side tanks that utilize the maximum size, and they are full of fuel. This plane probably has not more than 30 minutes or so of fuel on board. Um, I don't know if there's any way to show how much fuel it has on board, because this jet engine does not have MechJeb statistics for some reason. I cannot get it to show what, no matter what I do, all the delta V stats. So uh, it's kind of a little bit of a hassle to try and plan for in the hangar. But I guess with the XJ4, that's it. I don't think there was anything else that I could cover in 1957. Of course, Stacy would be the one to fly the XJ4 the majority of its flights. I don't know if anybody else flew it this year, but Ernest and Ernest and Gwen are going to be over in uh, the planning center with the new cockpit. This is the X15 cockpit, um, called the Mark One. Um, but they had been planning that, and they had been working with that cockpit. You can tell I'm starting to get a little bit burnt out. I'm starting to get a little bit tired after recording this long episode of straight talking. Um, but yeah, so I think that's it for this episode. I don't think I have anything left to cover. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask. Um, I'll do my best to answer everything very speedily in the comments, but if I haven't answered you right away, that just means that I'm busy at the moment, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Uh, as for this jet, hopefully I'll learn more in the future, and I'll try to be a little bit better at designing my jets. This one is basically the limits of what my technology is capable of. I think that in the future I might try to do an SR-71 type jet, just to farm hypersonic science, um, hypersonic cruise science. But for now, I'm stuck with the Hotoa XJ4. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching. If you like, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you didn't like, go ahead and tell me why uh, down in the comments below. And if you enjoy this channel's content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And I will see you all in the next episode of the Aurora Space Program. Bye bye.